Welcome everyone to this special hybrid meeting of the Nantucket Historic District Commission and the Organizational Focus Committee. It's Thursday, February 23rd at what time? 2:02. 2:02. There we go. Present at the meeting right at the moment are Abby Camp, myself, Ray Bowles, Susan Welch, Carrie Thornwell, and Val Oliver. Mary, you're not, are you here in an official capacity? No, right, okay, so like you're not, no. Okay. So, there's our board, let's see, can I have somebody? This is a matter of practicality, like, can you sit on both boards or? Yeah, you can, like vote on both, okay. Yeah. Because I should have asked. Sorry. Is any member of either committee on Zoom?
Well, Rob
Like
Benchley's there.
Well, no, but he's advisory.
Connie is.
And I think maybe Brenda, is she here for an application?
Oh,
No, I think
Okay.
she's here.
Okay.
yeah, for anybody waiting on quote applications, we're not reviewing those today. So, Connie, are you on Zoom right now?
Yeah.
There you are. Okay, so, Connie Patton, I think that's everyone. So first order of business would be to approve today's agenda. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. And we'll, do a roll call on that. So, on that motion, Val,
Aye.
Carrie,
Aye.
Stephen. Aye. Right. Aye.
Aye.
There we go. Okay. So that's the HDC component, and you need to officially open yours.
Yeah, so we'll open, call this meeting of the HDC Organization and Focus Committee to order February 23rd, shortly after 2 p.m. Motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Carries unanimously. So we are here today. Thank you all for coming. This type of matter typically going through the Organizational Focus Committee, but being of a significant enough level that as you all want to be involved, and we think you should all be involved. So we put it under that umbrella. Holly's going to give us an update on the advisory groups, next steps and so on. In particular, HSAB and the Sign Advisory Committee.
Oh, Diane's coming on.
She's.
Let the record reflect that Diane Coombs has joined us.
Hello.
Hi, Diane. We're just getting started. Okay, so back to you, Steve.
I'm actually passing the floor to Holly, and then I'll become number 2.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I guess at the last organizational focus committee, I guess it was, right? Doing HDC, there was our discussion with the advisory groups and basically a direction of coming up with a interim set of parameters, if you will. And since that meeting, I have received from the former chair of HSAB, now I guess the chair of HSAG on a 5th grade, some proposed policies and procedures for staff to review. Of course, the biggest thing was making sure I had director, approval on that, because as we all know, this office is busy as well. And I have not had any chance to really look at this. And I have informed Vicky of that, and I appreciated receiving it. My biggest caveat is that this will feed into the hopeful change to chapter 124 in the bylaw that would give the crux of the advisory board. That is something that is being currently reviewed by town council to when that would ever move forward. I can't give you any comment on that, but that's my take from a long-term perspective, short-term, long-term. And I would hope that that would be something that would move forward. I want to also mention that SAC, the Sign Advisory, is the only one out of all the advisories that actually has some sort of legal parameters, and that's why it was easier, shall we say, for the select board to actually provide the wave of the magic wand, allowing them to be reconstituted. We still have this part here that would provide parameters and guardrails, as Stephen had makes that comment. So that's kind of where that stands. I haven't had a chance to dive into it, but I will.
Okay, thank you, Holly. So, obviously we encourage you to pursue that. We understand you've got, in a sense, conflicting priorities with timelines and even regular HDC operational matters. So, we'll just leave that in your hands, trusting it, you and Nikki. And, as, Chris is the chair of Sun Advisory?
Yes, I don't have any relationship with them, quite frankly. That's strictly with Billy.
Okay,
So I haven't had a dialogue. Honestly, I would think that this policies and procedures that the historic structures is coming up with would help with any of the future ones, if that's okay. Not necessarily the sign,
Yeah.
because they're really already there under the bylaw. There is, I will say, a missing link that, amending 124 would help with, and that's what I'm looking at of doing. And I'll say again, I think I mentioned on the record before that Nantucket is unique, but so is Massachusetts. There's no other community in the Commonwealth that has any type of advisories. We were the only one when they were not legal at the time.
Interesting.
And so this kind of leads into the scope that we're going to discuss. That's why I'm reaching out to the professional colleagues at the national nonprofit level to give us assistance.
okay. And then just to clarify one point for everyone,
Yes.
is that, as Holly's mentioned before, but just in context today, chapter 124 is going to give the town, the community, the HDC through the select board, if it's drafted in such a way that there is a long-term legal ability and a procedure outlined to constitute the advisory groups. And in addition, for the HDC to be perhaps nominating and or somehow weighing in on the vote, so that we're getting advisory input from individuals who we feel have the qualifications to do so. And will 124 include any type of qualifications for membership or no?
Yes.
Okay, so clearly that's the longer term, and then the interim is what we discussed at the last meeting.
Yes.
So they're appointed, not elected.
I don't know, yeah,
Be appointed.
no one's,
Yeah,
Hmm,
just like,
interesting.
you all are the only elected body for the HDC.
because the
You
elected,
officials.
the elected officials are in regulatory capacity
Correct.
versus advisory.
There, is there some reason that we couldn't propose them as elected?
You mean just to be clear, like elected on a popular vote by the town? Is that what we're talking about?
I don't know.
No, if I may, Mr. Chairs, the way I would see this would be like any other committee, where the application process goes through town, just like how, for instance, our latest commissioner that was appointed, she went through the application process. It would be similar for the advisory boards, obviously with the HDC's input, but the same process.
I believe that is the process that we had when we gave the letter to the select board, was that the application were done through the select board with the HDC making the vote on who should get in, as we suggested that the HDC may know more than whoever is sitting as a select board member. I believe that's in our original letter that went down to them in, I don't know, July, I think.
I think the original letter had us as advisory. I'm
Right.
pretty sure.
Yeah, and Diane, on that, so you might have missed at the beginning, we were having a little bit of discussion about this. So on the table currently from our last meeting is an potential interim solution to provide, if you will, a packet of information to the select board. So in their executive capacity, they can act on a complete recommendation to establish HSAB and continue, sign advisory, and that would be interim. And then the longer term is to codify that under chapter 124 with details that are relevant and necessary. So you kind of came in, I think, on the tail end, just so you're aware so you are aware of where we were in the discussion is all.
I have a note, Mickey, I did get to read Mickey's, thing, it wasn't that long, and I thought it was, really good and solid. And I think, makes me want to adopt it right away, but those are my feelings.
And just to, again, just clarification, so at the last meeting, well, we didn't actually vote on it, but we had unanimous consensus that because there was this kind of a inconsistent set of recommendations between staff and advisory groups, that they would put their heads together, iron that out, and then bring it back to us. And the result of that product would go to the select board as our recommendation. So we're headed in that direction right now. And it's just going to be a matter of getting things in order. Like, for instance, school vacation is next week. So, and again, we do have applications we're processing. We want to get them on board and up and running is the other side of that. Any other comments on that?
So just, I wanna, the select board delayed their, deliberation on this from last Wednesday, is that right? It was up for review last Wednesday, and then they pushed it off until the Wednesday after the school break. So the idea is that we could be able to go in and in an informed way, like give them a package for their meeting, correct?
That, and the biggest thing is town manager wanted this commission to weigh in on the next topic, which is the scope. for the
Well,
independent review.
yeah.
That was the 100% crutch for having that delayed time.
Yeah, but I mean, so just following on that, the advisory board thing will be reviewed, and they're gonna be looking to us to have some sort of a cohesive package that they can either endorse.
Is that realistic though, having school break and then people don't get back till Sunday?
Well, I mean, I'm kind of with Abby, okay, what the letter from Mickey lacks is the staff input on that, because I know that there's some issues relating to the time, that's spent managing that stuff and all, and so that needs to be part of the package, I think.
So your inclination is to try to have that together for submission for the 15th,
Correct.
the select board.
Yes,
So may I,
yeah,
Holly, consistent with the fact that we'll be meeting, you've got the calendar, you tell me better than I. Again, as the organization and focus committee, if you
March 9th.
if you were to put together your inputs, maybe in context, even editing it out and in, within the context of Mickey's document, I don't think it needs to be, I'll just say my own belief is it doesn't need to be a pretty presentation type paper. It just needs to be pinned down as to the fact that both staff, and the HDC support the final product.
correct.
And I think if you can get that together, then we can do that
Yep.
next time we meet on a Thursday. And also to resolve anything that might come out of this next topic.
Yep.
We'll be doing the exact same thing, resolving anything open in order to advance it to the select board so that they can have a discussion about HDC stuff that doesn't relate to an appeal that's 800 pages long. So that'll be fun for them. Next up, we have commissioner comments and actions. This is a structured discussion. It pertains to the proposed draft scope of services for review of HDC ops that you all received, I believe. If you need more time to review them, it's not a lengthy list. It's not lengthy. It's not terribly involved. But if you just got them today, Did they get them just today?
I had sent it on an error that last time, so everybody did have it, but it was more or less, I said, don't review it, but then I sent it again today. and I
Okay.
apologize.
Okay, so it's out. Val, as a member of the organization focus committee, got a copy. When I received a copy, I'm just gonna kind of lead us into where we are and then start discussion. So to my mind, complexity, contentiousness, and the number of applications has created two backlogs. One has to do with the length of time it takes to start and actually review application. That backlog has created another, which is about self-assessment and course corrections. That is our reviewing and adapting to circumstances to consistently provide applicants an orderly process that is merit and principle based. At this point, the backlogs have inspired others to step in, which is resulting in this draft we're reviewing today. We're here to go person by person to collect your thoughts on the listed matters, specifically matters you have concerns about, if any. So again, just for the sake of time and discussion and wanting to go through thoroughly excuse me, Diane, go through thoroughly any concerns anyone has. I'd like to not necessarily go through the whole list if we don't have to, but focus on the concerns. So we'll go through and we'll listen to concerns, we'll jot them down, and then after everyone stated their concerns, we can go back and discuss them. If it looks like there's a lot of concerns, we're just going to discuss them as we go. What else? I will say one thing up front. I'll probably be last in commenting, and that's that the review, I believe, should specifically address operational versus mission-related matters. You know, of course, mission is our responsibility as elected officials. Along this line of thought, I believe the goal of the review should be to provide operations-related recommendations to, one, enhance the HDC's ability to appropriately review and enhance adherence to its guidelines, rules, and regulations. Number two, by helping to ensure the HDC is following required protocols. With that, I will ask if there's any questions on anything I've said, and then we'll jump into the document itself.
May I before?
Please.
Thank you. So before, first of all, thank you for having, for meeting. And second off, before you all dive into this, I wanted to mention that I am in the process of, and town administration, manager knows this, of reaching out to our colleagues at the National Alliance of Preservation Commissions. I don't know if you all remember, but in 2020, we had them do a virtual camp. Unfortunately, we were planning an in-person camp and then COVID happened. But in November of 2020 was when we had that camp. And you'll find that some of the consultants who are mentors of that program are professionals that the town of Nantucket knows. Preservation world is very, very small. And the more I go into my career, I see it's even smaller. Nothing bad about that. But and they gave us a report back in November of 2020. So there are some things that we have taken into consideration. There are some things that we could work on. And I just want to mention that they have received this scope as before you that came from town admin. I'm hopeful to hear something back soon, because if a third party is to be reviewing the HDC, the Historical Commission, the HDC Historic District, National Historic District, National Historic Landmark, CLG combo from a 100,000-foot view, and that's what I'm recommending, that it should be done by preservation folks that are, that's what they do. That's exactly what they do. They mentor commissions across the country. So with that said, they do a normal camp program. Mary's familiar with a couple of the trainers as well. Not only do they do camping and to talk about policies and procedures on how to facilitate design review processes, but also they go down to like the disaster preparedness and stuff. And my point is on this, they have also been very helpful over the last couple of years, specifically on helping commissions in more than what they've been doing for the last 40 years or so. And I'm very hopeful that they are going to be able to provide something very, very necessary for this island moving forward for the historic district in general. So, and as soon as I receive that, I have mentioned that I will be forwarding it to you all for your consideration. I was hopeful that I would receive something today before this meeting, but I have not. So with that, I leave it to you all. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Holly. So just two clarifications. Well, does anyone have any questions for Holly on what she just said?
I do, go for it. Okay, so you had said the word preservation, folks. So a lot of what we review has nothing to do with preservation per se. It has to do with like new buildings, swimming pools, what's our new favorite, solar, things like that. So hopefully they're versed in
Yes,
that
yes,
as well. Okay, all right.
yes. They handle all aspects of historic districts, which include historic district commission.
Okay.
Yes,
Because what we do is a lot more than just, reviewing 200-year-old buildings.
absolutely.
Yeah, okay,
But you're also more than a design review board as well. I just want to
Correct.
make sure that's clear.
right, okay. All right, thanks. That's good for me.
Oh, okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Holly, can you circulate the Camp 2020 so we have
Yes.
that to look at?
Absolutely.
Okay. Review, so we're gonna I just want to give you one last tidbit here. So the relevance of this is with respect to the way a municipality operates. It's a scope of services. So like in our everyday businesses or activities, we understand that that's the guidance. But this will actually become the base, the backbone, and the foundation of a request for proposals. Once that goes through the process, it becomes a contract, and then that's the legally obligated work, not more, not less. So not only are we looking at this with respect to items that are important to us, we want to make sure that we're helping to guide with an idea for, when is it likely that this would actually come to fruition if it were voted in by the select board? 3 months, 6 months, a month?
I have no idea.
So, okay, my point is just
Yeah.
try to be forward looking a
Yeah.
little bit, if, to the extent that is reasonable. Val, you had an opportunity to review this a little bit. Do you want to comment? Do you have any concerns?
I can't articulate them at this time. I just looked at it before I came in here, so. It's a lot.
Give us one.
Are
favorite.
we talking about this?
Yes. Yeah. You want me to go first? I just want an extra second to breathe.
Well, I don't. I don't know.
Just to be clear, so two of you are. You're acting right now in your capacity as OFT, right?
Yeah, but I'm opening it up, it's open to the floor.
Okay, all right. I didn't want to intrude.
Yeah, no. So whomever may have a concern or a comment on a particular topic, I was hoping to get. Well, the result of this meeting is that by the end of the next meeting, in combination with whatever supplemental material we receive from Holly, is that at the next meeting, we will vote through our recommendation for the proposal.
Mhm,
Keep in mind that this is the town proposal.
right,
We're anticipating and hopeful that the town will be working in partnership with us, and what we ask for revisions will be made, and it'll go forth that way, real strong foundation working together. But I mean, it's a town proposal. It's not the HDC.
Mhm.
So this is for the person,
No, this is,
that
no, this is for a review. It's basically an audit of how the HDC does what it does. And a set of recommendations, and it'll go out to bid. And the person or the company that, I presume it'll be a company that gets hired to provide this service. To perform these tasks. Will be performing the tasks that are in the paperwork. And we're reviewing that paperwork to determine what changes we may want, if any. Or what, including what we might want to add or revise. So that's our role in this process. Because otherwise it's outside of our hands. 'Cause it's-
Can you give us an example? Because I'm
Yeah,
not
sure.
sure if I'm supposed, I think my things are so minimal and.
Okay, mine revolve around my opening statement that, have to do with. This should be reserved to operations and not mission related. And I don't think that there's any intention to creep over, I just think this is, you have executive Libby who looked at this holistically and put together her thoughts. But from the HDC standpoint, making the distinction between operations and mission. So in that spirit, my comments would be, as an example, number 1, 2, 3, 4, under this the third paragraph, review staffing and operations for the commission.
Yes,
Number 4, are HDC regulations current? Are any updates recommended such as sustainability needs and new requirements, guidelines, or best practices? Other than best practices, I think all of that is mission and it shouldn't be in this document. So sustainability determinations, those come from the elected official.
I agree.
So that would be an example
I agree.
of the perspective. The other one would be, are staff resources sufficient? To my mind, one of the biggest issues we face, and it's very trivial, it seems very trivial, but the incompleteness of applications. And of course, we can always get an application, somebody as a commissioner can say, hey, this is incomplete, we're sorry, you're gonna have to complete it and bring it back. But for me, the question is, are our resources, I don't know if it's the number of people or what they do or how they do what they do, but are they sufficient to prevent incomplete applications from reaching the table, number one, but number two, while allowing applicants and their agents who aren't abusive of the process, a quick email that says, you need to turn this in, this, and this, as opposed to it going to the table and then as the HDC 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks after an application was turned in, we're telling them it's incomplete. We could do that, but it creates other problems. One is discontent. One is, a sense of, there not being goodwill on the part of the HDC that you all waited 6 weeks or 4 weeks before my application was heard to tell me that it's not complete enough and I've got to come back. So for me, with respect to our staff resources sufficient, I just think that's an incredibly important one because it will, once that culture is attained, go away. But I think it's an important one for us to stage success with if this process is going to be successful and actually making changes. So those are 2 examples, if they're helpful. I've got just a couple more, but I'll wait unless you got
Well, I have some.
Yeah, go.
So
I
first
just want to
of all,
reserve my time.
yeah, so first of all, overarching. When this concept was first floated, it was described to me as a holistic review. And I'm looking at, it's talking about the board, it's talking about the staff mainly. I think one of this issue has a lot of different heads. We're getting more applications, just more applications physically than we ever have. And I like to use the example of both pools and solar, because those are things that 10 years ago showed up like occasionally, if at all, on an agenda. Every now and again, you get a pool. Well, that's changed, and that has changed because the real estate dynamic, a few things, solar tax credits, right? That's one thing that's driving that. And then there's the fact that realtors are out there saying, well, you can rent your place for $100,000 more if it has a pool. So everybody wants a pool now. Okay, so that has changed. Now, we are as a board faced with all these a massive amount of applications for stuff that we formerly didn't have. Beyond that, what we also now have is because land is becoming more and more scarce and it's getting more and more subdivided, that now all of a sudden we're getting a lot more activity from neighbors.
Mhm.
Neighbors are showing up and they said, they always thought like, whoa, you know, there's one house next to me. What do you mean there's gonna be 4 houses next to me? Like, that's crazy. How can there be 4 houses? So we're getting way more. Look, I've been presenting to the board for 30 years and neighborhood opposition is at an all-time high.
Mhm.
I'm not saying that it's a bad thing. I'm saying, you know, it's good, it yields good results, but what it is doing is it's meaning that, like, instead of us just hearing from the applicant and going straight to a review, we now have to listen to 10 neighbors,
Mhm.
all right? And how do we deal with those 10 neighbors, right? And this is all a result of the escalating real estate values on Nantucket. So my point is, there's a lot of stuff outside, like neighbors. I'm gonna mention the planning board. I know something that's near and dear to Abby because the planning board, as far as I know, does not solicit HCC input, nor does it need to. You know, well, Stephen knows. You know, basically, if your subdivision plan meets the guidelines
Mhm.
and it results in lots that are like 30 feet wide and 500 feet long, trailing down a hill, wouldn't it? It's approved.
Mhm.
It's approved. So right now, there's no dialogue with the planning board and we don't have any kind of input into that. Similarly, the Concom has dictated how things are gonna be handled down in the low-lying, like Brant Point type area, flooding areas where you can't bring any fill, you can't do this, do that. So that's at odds with the HDC wanting to see these buildings less tall, and we are kept from using mechanisms that could potentially really help us because of other boards. So one thing I don't see on here is like how we interface or don't, as the case may be, with other regulatory boards on Nantucket to achieve the goals of the HDC. And I think that would be something that I personally would like to have as part of the review of whoever is going to be doing this. You know, how do we interface with those people so that we don't say, you got to do it this way, and the Concom says, oh, we can't do it that way.
Well, and you're right. I think we field a whole lot of issues that are not us.
Completely.
Yeah.
I like to call ourselves, we're the regulatory board of last resort.
Right.
Right? So if neighbors are unhappy and they can't take a crack at it through the Concom. It's already through the Concom, it obeys all the rules. They can't do it through the planning board because it's already passed the planning board. Who's left? Oh,
Mhm.
the HDC. So let's go and let's just make a big fuss at the HDC about noise from pools and lighting from pools and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And we are, you know, wasting so much time
Yeah.
listening to all this stuff that is just not germane to what we're doing. Anything else?
I jotted those down. Case in point, we spent 21 minutes reviewing an application before the HDC commissioners had an opportunity to speak 2 weeks ago. And it was largely redundant comments
Yes.
or comments that aren't within our purview that can taint the outcome on an appeal. And it's very difficult to be controlling those without having tools. So what I just try to close this one up is not important. I've made notes that what we would like to address are tools to address complexity, number one, primarily with the historic structures, contentiousness, including the extent that it's reasonable to engage the opposition. And another tool, which I think is more simply addressed, is the number of applications, which is protocols and how we work. And then the contentious ones would include pool solar. And one we didn't include, but there is a greater quantity of historic renovations.
It's a big one.
So, does that fairly capture your intent?
Yeah.
Okay.
Could I say something?
Go ahead.
Diane.
Okay, what Ray brought up, I think is very important with the listening to the planning board and Concom and all that, because we run into it and it comes to us to be regarded, and it's already been passed by them. So how many times have we heard somebody say, well, it's already been passed by the planning board, so, you know, what are you doing? Somehow, if we had meetings with the other things, there should be some sort of relative position. We, as the HDC, from what I understand from the notes that say what we do, is that we have control over what we do. We don't have to listen to what other boards say. We are supposed to be the final decision-making commission. We seem to lost track of that, or I have misinterpreted it. But
Well, Diane, I would have to take issue with that. You know, I wish what you were saying were true. But like, let's just say that the HDC said, no, the house is too tall down in Brant Point. What you have to do is, you know, grade up to the house so that it looks less tall. That's gonna get to the Concom, and the Concom is gonna say categorically, we do not approve fill in flood zones. We do not approve it. We will not allow it. And so that's, you just get nowhere with that one. You
But if
can't
we-
override the Concom.
Well,
why can't we override the Concom? Why can't we say, no, we don't want houses
well,
35
better,
down there?
another look is when someone says the Concom has approved the house here. This is the foundation we're working on. So they come with a humongous, and it's gonna be tall, but that's where we come in and say, no, you can't just put a 3-story box on this tall thing. You have to bring it down architecturally. You have to have some 1-story masses. You have to, so that, in that sense, we do have a say. But a lot of people use the other boards to say, we're allowed to do this. We've already been told we can do this, like driveways. Main Street,
Right.
like, oh, we've been told we can have 14 feet. It's like, well, we're telling you, you have to stick to 12. So we do have the last say. We just need to stick to it. It seems.
Well, and maybe, I thought I saw somewhere on our checklist, is there any other information from other boards? That frequently doesn't get given to us with the application, so maybe that's something to,
Yeah.
you know, make sure we get.
Applicants seem to want to come to us last because they've got the leverage of the other regulatory boards.
But we don't have to stand up for it and accept
And
it.
please,
time.
please, I just would
What?
like to finish my thought. Look, I just want to back up to your comment. We don't need a note or authority from someone to exercise our authority. We just need to exercise it, like Carrie just said. That comes down to us. So either we do it or we don't. I agree with the chairman, though. I think what he's saying implicitly is it's very difficult to deny someone the right to build based upon what could be perceived as subjective criteria, whereas the regulatory authority, the other regulatory authorities have a hard and fast 100-foot, 50-foot. The planning board has subdivision control laws they have to follow, or they'll lose in court at great expense to the town. The other regulatory boards have a different set of regulations that they follow differently than we do by virtue of the fact of the nature of those regulations. Whereas ours are subjective, have room for subjective interpretation. So it comes down to, though, still, as Carrie was saying, in my mind, that we need to exercise our authority. I'm of a mind that, you know, people do have a property right, and I want to not impinge on it, but my primary goal is preservation of the historic districts and aesthetically development outside of the historic districts. So I just want to give a perspective on that, other than, I just don't want everybody thinking we need a note from someone.
We don't need to know.
You're on the same line as Diane.
Yeah. Okay, so just on that one, I've got intercommission review, planning board, Concom. I guess I'd like to get some feedback from you guys. I think the only way to address that in a practical manner, in terms of sequence, is that applicants come to us first. One, I don't think we can compel them to do that. And two, I don't know that it will make sense, because they have, the other regulatory authorities have a box that they work within. So if we then, it's kind of a waste of time for applicants if we start them down a road that they simply can't pursue based upon, we want low, 1-story expanded ground cover versus a box. Right.
So
box.
if I may,
Yeah,
because you bring up a good point, so we have land use regulations, right, that the planning board, zoning board, they upheld. Height included, right, just because it's their maximum can be here, your ground cover is here, doesn't mean it has to be built to that standard. You all have that authority to say, no, let's bring the ridge down, and all that stuff. So yes, thank you for bringing that up, because it's very, very important. You all do have that part. Back to the chicken and the egg thing, that's how I like to call it, because we get that question all the time. Who do I need to go to first? Really and truly, my opinion, it's, if one needs the other, you can go through it at the same time. Planning board, for instance, for if it's a second curb cut, or it doesn't meet the regulation off the corner of the intersection, go to the planning board and the HDC at the same time. Why not? But that's been a question a lot of times.
So can I suggest that on this particular topic is what we do is just everybody think about it a little bit. And maybe we can continue this particular topic at the next meeting.
Is it kind of like saying the planning board,
Or
Concom
we
say,
can
this
just
is what
talk
you
about
could do? I just have one
Yeah,
little,
no, it's fine.
but we're the ones that are saying, this is what you can do. You could do that, but we're saying you can do this, can't do everything.
Wait, I'm
Does
not
that make sense?
following it. Say that again.
Well, it's just going to Holly's thing, maxing out a property for all the potential. That's great. We'd all love to do that, but you can't.
How
Because
many
we're on
times have we
Nantucket or
heard,
this
this,
or-
I'm gonna paraphrase what you're suggesting. How many times have we heard, we've seen these like minuscule footprints because the 50-foot wetland setback
Mhm.
only allows for a footprint that's like this big, right? And they can't go beyond that. Absolutely can't. They will not be granted a waiver or anything like that. Oh, and they don't get a basement because it's in a wetland, right? And so all that stuff has to go up and on this little tiny footprint. And so what they're gonna try and do is go all the way up on the entire thing. And we see all kinds of examples of that down in Brand Point.
Yeah.
You drive around, you see these like little narrow things that just go all the way up to the full 2 stories. And it's because they were limited on their Concom footprint. And the HDC just gave in and said, okay, we realize that you have to, make the most of this little teeny tiny piece of property, and didn't yield and didn't insist on there being sort of additive massing or anything like that. Because
That's where we have to be
it's
structured.
very difficult.
We have to just say, well, it's not our problem that you only have, a 500 square foot lot but you want all these
They
things on
paid
it.
$10
Just-
million for,
So this is an area that I just want to see if we can, 2 quick things. So on Carrie's point, just to be clear. So the planning board in this type of a thing, if we had a pre-review period, a meeting, they're limited. It's this zoning, it's the setbacks, front, rear and side. And that's it. Or there's a height requirement, or under the zoning bylaw, there's a requirement to go to the ZBA for the pool. They have very limited input, so I think, and Concom is very similar, but in a different regard with respect to their 100, their 50, whether they do fill or not. Should we not talk to them and try and see if there can be some changes? Yes. I'm not disputing that that could be helpful, but that's a different process that involves articles of town meeting and all kinds of other things that are well beyond our ability to deal with right now.
Or simply letting them know that. What you're doing, saying you have to go to the HDC and it has to be approved by them.
Well, they can't legally carry, they can't legally do that.
They can't.
They can't require another regular. I mean, I'm not trying to be the wet towel here, I'm just.
No,
You
no,
know, I'm
that
actually,
is-
I'm agreeing with you definitely, Stephen, up and
It's
down
just
that.
bureaucracy.
That is.
Crap.
Strawberry race. You can't tell, one board can't tell a person that you can't do this until you get their approval, because then the other board can say, well, you can't do this until you get their approval.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying they just need to remind people like, yes, you can, this is 50% is your ground cover, but you've got to go to the HDC and they're gonna have the.
They're still not gonna do that. All I can say on that regard is this is why it was very important for us to have resilient Nantucket design guidelines that were based on a holistic approach, based on the national standards that just came out, because it takes that kind of stuff into consideration.
Right.
As well as our CRP.
Let us go. Is really good too.
Yeah.
So one tool that we might use and we might think about pursuing separately, or maybe this group can put together for us in our toolbox, is what entity we would pair with on an educational effort for particular areas such as Brand Point, where there are wetlands, and the HDC would be trying to put out information, or whomever the entity is within the town, with respect to the restrictions and the fact that just because you have to go in doesn't mean going up is really a solution, because it changes the character. That's an educational process that they buy into literally when they buy the home. But it's one, outside the purview of this meeting. I'm not saying we can't talk about it. I'm just saying it's not something we can accomplish here. And two, it's outside the purview of the HDC, I think, to be doing educational outreach. Maybe we could partner with this historic commission. They could be getting grant money. They could be focusing on something like that. Well, we're focusing on these other operational related
And you
things.
could still have a buy-in, Mr. Chair, with the CLG.
So, right, and so what I'd like to suggest, and I'm just looking for a consensus or not, so I know whether to move forward or not on the other topics, is that perhaps an educational outreach program would be one example of tools that this group would put together in the RFP service, under the RFP that is hired. Part of their scope of service would be to help alleviate pressure through educational means, and then identifying who those parties are.
Real estate agents.
Mm-hmm.
I can't tell you how many times people come and say, oh, my real estate agent told me I can do this, and I'm like,
I hate to say it, but you know, there's a profit motive there.
Yeah,
Which
absolutely.
basically the profit motive is as at odds with saying, oh, you're gonna be very, very heavily restricted on this property. And they're gonna walk away.
I want to disclose that I am a broker. I'm a member of NARAB and the Nantucket
I
Association.
meant to say present company.
And I'm hopeful we're not just taking shots at different entities and groups. This is about solutions.
Yeah,
So is there anyone who's uncomfortable with the idea that
I'm totally comfortable with it. I think it's a good thing to add in there.
But since the realtors were brought up, I just want to mention an NRAB. So myself, Mary, and the former chair of the historical commission did a class for NRAB for their educational component last year. We had and everything about Nantucket, but also on the national level when it comes to preservation of being a historic district and what it means to sell a historic structure within a historic district. And let me tell you, we had a lot of people, realtors, that were very happy, and they said, I had some people say that was the best class I've ever had in all the years I've been a realtor here. So we're looking at doing that again next year. Hopefully Mary is listening at some point, and she'll also buy in on that as well. So again, all this conversation is very helpful, and there are things that the other commission wants to help this commission with, and through your joint CLG, that can be accomplished. But that is something that the historical commission did do. And will
Terrific.
continue using that as one of their priorities for this coming up year. So, of course, I'll keep you posted on that, but that is something, because they see that educational component helps the overall historic district together.
So, thank you.
Can I ask Holly a question.
Sure.
On our letter we had with the Historic Commission, did we not say that we would work together on what was going on that letter? The MOU we had with them?
If you're talking about the required MOU, that's one thing, because the one that we were working on has kind of fizzled out and not been finalized.
Yeah, I'm surprised to say that it's not within our purview to educate anybody on this HDC features.
Diane, that's not what I said. I'm not taking that as you're being conflict oriented, but don't presume that I said that we can't educate anyone about HDC stuff. I was saying that this particular topic is outside the purview of this meeting and the scope of services. And the educational effort that is required is outside the HDC's purview. For instance, we don't submit for grants. It's not part of our legislation. You require a grant unless everyone is at the table is going to pony up money to hire the person to create the illustrations and the information and then publish them and then figure out who to distribute them to and then distribute them. That is
No.
not our purview. So I just wanted to be clear on what I was saying. I wasn't taking as you were being
No,
confrontational.
all right. I was talking to Holly about that exact thing about the grants. Isn't the Historic Commission able to get federal grants?
Yes, that's why we suggested that this group who's putting together the RFP will come up with a list of tools to help alleviate pressure on the regulatory authority, i.e. us, through, for example, this type of an initiative. But we've got a whole list of other things to go through, so we need to jump back into that. I think it's fair just to summarize that whole discussion as our Commissioner Emeritus says, people move to Nantucket because they fell in love with it, and then they try to change it to where they were. And part of that is, maximizing the footprint and the dollar values and so on and so forth. But we need to get an educational effort out to try and address that. It'll help us. Okay. Did you have any more?
No, that was it.
Abby? At this time, anything?
Well, were we on the review staffing
You can pick whatever you
Or
want.
anywhere.
anywhere?
Any concerns you have, we want to voice.
Could I just reiterate, something I think it was Ray that brought up, collaboration with the planning board, because I had a really hard time working on Old Farm Road. And I was, sort of always wondering if they had ever actually gone out there. This is before your time. Yeah, and Duke's Road as well. I mean, I just sometimes wonder, because the steepness of the terrain there. This is the one near the Catholic Cemetery, remember all of that. And then it proceeded to get developed with that sort of development where you have the main house, the second dwelling, a swimming pool and a cabana, all going at such a steep slope that if there's a torrential rain, one wonders if it's all not going to end up at the end of Dead Horse.
So totally hear what you're saying. Back to Stephen's point of earlier. The planning board, in approving a subdivision, has a certain set of rules, frontage, area of lot, regularity. There's all these prescribed things. None of them has to do with topography. And so that's completely beyond the HCC's purview when we start talking about, well, the planning board didn't look at this the right way. What they did was they followed their guidelines, which, in my opinion, needs some major reworking, but that's a different board. That's not the HDC. To prevent stuff like that from happening, but here we are, like, those are the rules that are in place, and I don't think that we're gonna get a lot of traction if we say, oh, you have to change your rules.
I just want to comment on that because the guidelines and the rules that the planning board follow aren't their rules.
Right.
And that's what I mean by subjectivity. We have the authority to establish our own. Those are state statutes and regulations and state, town statute and regulation. So those are through annual town meeting. They are not something that the planning board doesn't decide on this one, we want it to be 5,000 square foot, on this one, we want it to be 10,000, irrespective of the topography. The topography is not part of their purview, and they work with the lot sizes they have to work with under the subdivision control law. So, I mean, just so we're all aware of that, because we can talk about these things, but if we're not aware of the ground rules that they have to follow, we're not actually accomplishing anything.
Right.
So the one last thing, the productive outcome would be for the community to become involved through engaging the planning board on zoning matters if a majority of people felt that it was important to do so, but that's not
Well, I was,
part of our
I
process.
was going towards a collaboration with the planning board. That would, it would be, if we somehow on big projects that look like they might be sort of.
Yeah, no, you're missing, you're absolutely missing.
And I don't mean any offense by that.
No, it's just,
So let's say that we went in as a board and we said, oh my gosh, don't approve that because those lots are all gonna be too steep. The planning board is gonna say, but they meet all the regulations. We cannot not approve it. We have to.
okay, well, let me go on to something else. Okay. I find sometimes when we get to a point with an application where the board, we're all believe it should be denied, that we have trouble denying something. And I don't know why we do. You don't?
No,
Well,
I mean, I wish that you guys would move to deny more stuff.
Well, but there's some sort of fear, and my fear comes that I don't want to be a burden to the select board, that I don't want to have to, because then it goes to them and then there's an appeal or whatever. So, but I would like to deny more things just
Just out of happenstance or?
every other one that starts with a 3.
If it's clear that it's a nickel and diming arrangement and we're gonna just keep at this for another 6 months and it's jamming up our agenda, I would rather just cut the tether.
Well, you guys were forgetting, sorry, Gary, we're forgetting, we established one of our standards that we voted on is that if they don't make material changes within 3 meetings, it's a denial. And then we voted that if the standard is if it's a denial based on a unanimous vote, it doesn't come back for 2 years. So we have rules in place. We just need to exercise the authority.
Well,
And I don't disagree with you that sometimes there's hesitation. Personally, when it comes to the select board, I feel like the more we deny that have a basis to be denied and we articulate that basis properly, we are allowing the select board to say, absolutely not, you got to go back to them with a new application. And the more that happens,
yeah,
the less the behavior will continue.
and I think they'll respect us
It's
more.
a scale issue.
So,
If I may, on that point, I just wanted to mention that I had the opportunity to speak to our select board chair a year or so ago, and it was just so happened to be before an appeal that you all had. And, I'm always like, it's at the end of your agenda, so sorry about that. And, I actually mentioned the reason what makes Nantucket unique with our special act, along with Back Bay and Boston, the only 2 special acts in Massachusetts, is because it allowed us to stay at the local level that appeal. Whereas if we were following chapter 40C, guess where it goes? Off island, bye-bye to Boston, Superior Court, not, and out of Nantucket's, local control. So that's something I think that this commission may even want to just keep in the back of your head, that, it's local folks that are there, that are listening to what's going on. But I agree with Stephen wholeheartedly on that.
So, go ahead, I'm sorry.
A couple years ago, I floated a warrant article that said, like all the other regulatory boards on Nantucket, we should go directly to Superior Court. And the answer that I got back was, well, that's unfair if the HDC denies somebody a fence. And that now, in order to get their fence, they kind of pay a lot of money to go to Superior Court. It's, the ante to go to Superior Court is big. But so I understand that justification, but I also know that if right now applicants are like, well, you know, if I'm not getting what I want at the HDC and I go to the select board, maybe I'll get what I want there. And it's not that much money and it's just a little extra step for me, and they might overturn the HDC. And so I think the perception is like, so we get denied by the HDC, you know, okay. But if it went to Superior Court and said, oh boy, that's gonna be months and months and thousands of dollars, they would make sure they got their approval from the HDC.
Maybe it should
Well-
be thousands of dollars here.
Well, so couple of quick things. One, nothing prevents someone from going to the state Superior Court on an appeal.
Correct.
So that's their next step.
Yes.
Number two, the other part of it, I just want to put a final point on Holly's point. One aspect of that is that the state is used to working with chapter 40C,
40C.
which is a different type of historic district commission with different authority than our enabling legislation. And when viewed through that lens, our authority is more limited. And my point is if it goes in front of a judge who has the background in the 40C Act versus our own, and they're focused more on that because they believe through their judicial authority that it's more relevant, which has happened in the past, then our authority is kind of short-sheeted. Number one. Number two, I think one of the things that I'm going to include it in here in our list, but judicious denials are a tool.
Yeah.
And we need to not lose sight of that. I would
How many
suggest.
appeals happen? Almost
But
none.
not-
Yeah,
Yeah.
almost none.
No, I'm just saying, there are two, if there's.
Not more than
It
10 a
does.
year.
No, there's gonna be more with our 3 and out rule.
Yeah, there already are.
Just my last thought is about back and forth when we're when somebody comes up, an applicant comes back up.
Oh, you're talking about Stevens rules?
Yeah, maybe it's.
I mean, Robert's rules.
Roberts. Well, it's just that sometimes there's so much back and forth and then it sort of implodes and people get really upset. I wish there was a bell or something. You could just say,
Well, Sarah has a timer, you know, when with town meeting.
Yeah. I know, well, maybe something like a timer, but that might be a little harsh, but maybe there's some way we can stop either neighbors, applicants, or even ourselves. We tend to get in a thing where we're changing somebody's project to a point where we're saying, no, it's just a few more inches. Well, no, not just quite that. Oh, we've got to change that roof line. So maybe we minimal help people, but not actually redraw.
Design at the table?
Yeah, designing
I
at the
agree.
table, I think can be minimal and helpful.
But I think
But-
with clear instructions, you have to take 6 feet off this building. Because
Yeah.
it's lot to lot
Yeah,
line, when it's 2
yeah.
stories tall, lot line to lot line.
Right.
That kind of stuff. is-
I think that's different than saying take 6 feet off here and doodle around with the roof. So I think Carrie's right that making a statement is not derogatory, making little things are. But I do think, particularly since it came up quite a lot last Tuesday night, that I thought we had a rule saying that the applicant would present and then it would go to the other two groups and then to the commission, that there was no back and forth talk.
We do, Diane, so we just have to try and follow it. It's a change in our culture, right? We all want to help. Many of us who are in the design architectural world, we're accustomed to reviewing these things in more of a design charrette environment where there's a back and forth, a little bit of brainstorming to come to solutions. I understand the utility of that to some extent, because if we can get it off our table, we get it off our table without having to listen to a reintroduction at a subsequent meeting. But I think to answer your question, it's just a matter of us developing discipline. And part of that is, and I'd like to say what I'm sharing is your concerns, please, short declarative statements. It will help, by the way, Esmeralda do minutes, but it gives the applicant a clear understanding and then we can just move on.
Well, I think
Speedy processes.
So that's also complete applications. It goes to the complete application thing, that people have to have all the information, so we can.
I wanted to make just a quick point on the order. Robert's Rules of Order gives you the authority as a commissioner, you can say, point of order, Mr. Chair, to speed things along.
Yeah,
to-
yeah.
To, okay, we've had this back and forth.
Yeah.
You can do that when people are talking on the line.
Yeah,
Use it.
I know, I gotta practice that in front of the mirror.
And we could use it on ourselves, and I'm not guilty of that too, you know, I interrupt sometimes. We need to develop a better.
You're a stream of consciousness.
All right, so we're doing what we're talking about not doing during meetings, so I'm gonna say, let's,
Point of order.
I hate.
other concerns.
That's all, the only other thing was that, back to the building on a slope, when we said a cross section, could we ask for, if there's any movement of grade over 2.5 feet, do they automatically put in a cross section, or do we always have to ask them to
Well,
do that?
we actually voted a rule on it,
Yeah, okay, good.
and so.
Yeah, I thought
think
we
it's
did.
3 feet, 3 feet.
3 feet, okay, so if anybody comes in with a steep,
Yeah, and we standardized it, so that the existing is one color and both plan and cross-section, and the proposed is one color in both sets of drawings, so it's simpler and easier for us to be reviewing it. Karen?
What about sign offs? We didn't really ever talk about that, but when a project is signed off by the HDC.
Mhm.
When it's clearly that the landscape has been manipulated so much more, it doesn't get signed off, and then it comes back to us as an as-built.
Post-approval,
And are they looking at just the front street, or if a project is on 2 streets? Because the back is very different from the front. So that is something I think has to.
so
Way.
can you, I just want to make sure I understand, you're saying, I think what you're saying is we approve something and then it's not done that way,
And then it's signed off
and then
with the
it's
HDC,
signed off
Well,
during an
not,
inspection.
not always.
not always. But how is that process done to sort of make sure that things aren't so egregious? I understand the tweak of some little thing is fine, but
Billy
when it's
goes out.
massively different
Really
than.
good.
Billy goes out and he circles
Good.
everything,
good,
everything that's inconsistent with the drawings. And then he sends it to me, and if it's inconsequential, I will sign
And
it
it's
off.
fine, right?
If it's not inconsequential, then it goes back to the board. But a point that, you know, a point that sort of follows from that is, here we are, we're like wasting more time. We're spending more of our volunteer time re-reviewing an application because they just decided they didn't feel like doing it the right way.
Yeah, it's when
And-
things are egregious.
Yeah,
Well, and then we're held to a very, very small,
how do you fix it?
no,
Oh,
fine.
Fines.
oh, the fine.
I mean-
right,
Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
So one of the items I'm gonna identify in addition to, well, by the way, our previous discussion is under Robert's Rules of Order, so that's gonna be addressed. They're gonna recommend we take courses and so on and so forth. But on this particular topic, fair to say post-approval teeth, like a little bit of a stick, something to, I mean, currently what happens, I think, is that the fee is so insubstantial, and I'm not suggesting the fee should necessarily be the same for every single offense. So for instance, I don't know, say you take a foundation out and you didn't have approval. It seems to me like that is certainly a larger fine than if you put a window in and it's slightly smaller, but it's enough that it's not really approvable. Or maybe it's approvable, but we spend a half an hour on it. It's still not a $5,000 fine. So is it fair to include that as a concept?
I think it should be a grading
Finding
thing
scheme.
where there's one, you've done it wrong, this is not, we signed off on this application. There's a fee of a couple $1,000, and then it escalates as to the severity of it.
I know it says fees on here as far as the staff time, but I want you all to look at it on holistic. This
Correct.
specific, but everything across the
Yep.
board. So
So,
Yeah, I mean, I can think of one specifically that I was involved in, was supposed to be an addition, and the whole house got ripped down and
Yep.
rebuilt.
Yep.
Over by my town.
$1,000.
Yeah, no, I.
Oh, that's
Right, she got knocked
So
down without even.
the initial fee should could probably be very,
Right, so
Yeah.
a finding scheme tiered to the severity, but also I would suggest we look at repeat offenders. Because that is an abuse of the process. Again, I don't know how that gets through the law.
I mean, I
That's
like it
good.
in concept.
Yeah,
I like it in concept.
okay. Val,
What,
you want a voice?
which one are we on?
It's
Oh,
you,
just
you
any in
said,
general?
yeah, is there anything that you want to make sure gets included in finalizing this? I mean, you can mention stuff next, on the Thursday next, but if we can pin the stuff down now, it'd be better. Because Thursday next, the idea is just to put this forth for the Friday the Friday deadline for the select board. Is it the Friday deadline or the following Wednesday?
No, that Friday.
The Friday,
Erica was
right.
over that Friday.
Well, I brought the list from when we did those organizational things that we ratified. I think that needs to be somewhere, posted somewhere, because I even forgot about some of them, and I was with you when we were doing this thing.
Yeah, no, I got you. So can I answer that?
Yeah,
So one of the things is, and just to be clear, under the town charter, for those to become a hard and fast regulation, there is a noticing process and a public hearing process. We did a noticing process through our typical channel, which is the town clerk's office. And we did a public hearing process by virtue of the fact that they were posted in the agenda. That's not the same. So what we've adopted are best practices that are standards that we've agreed to follow. They're not regulations.
okay, so I
But we
said the
can-
wrong thing.
We can do that still, and I would suggest we do, because if this takes 6 months or 9 months or a year to finally get to a final product, we want to have those. But in the meantime, we can make copies. I will ask that I will make a truncated version that does not include the explanatory text. And then we will include them if on the tail end of the agenda, along with how we operate a meeting. Is that good with you? Yeah. Anyone have an objection? Okay, so we'll include those. Any other ones?
No, I just thought that would solve a lot of this.
I think it will. And that's why I wish we had 3 more months before the independent review came out, because I think we could solve a lot of our own problems, but the systematic problems of following Robert's rules of order and other things, I think it's gonna be important for people to get involved in. I have Carrie. Any more from you? I'm sorry, I'm cognizant of the time, I'm trying to get through.
We do have Connie and.
Well, I was gonna ask Diane next, and then Connie. Diane?
Yeah,
So of the list of the scope of services you were provided, is there anything you want to add or request a change to?
I can't see any that I would request a change to. I can see some that I would like to have more conversation about. That's all.
Well,
That's
why
all.
don't this is the time, go ahead.
Well, I have jotted them down. I haven't had time to pull them together myself because I just got this paper this morning early.
Okay,
So-
so, may I ask, in the interest of our being able to meet our deadline, turning this around, if we are gonna actually have any input, we have a deadline to meet. So we'll be meeting on Thursday, March 9th. And that will be our deadline at the end of that meeting. So what I would ask, Diane, is if you would please put your thoughts into an email and provide them to staff, who can then provide them to the other commissioners. So we can have an understanding before that Thursday meeting, what it is you want to discuss, and that will help us. Are you
Right.
okay with that?
Yep, that's fine. I took some notes on Tuesday night that I was having a problem with. As far as what we weren't doing and should be doing. Sort of seeing how long each application takes us. I think if you want to know one thing, I think it's hard to say you only have 5 minutes to say what your application is. Because there are some applications that will take longer because of all the the intricacies of it. So, I think that's one of the ones that you have to be a little giving. But somebody who goes on and repeats themselves continually, then they should be part of the 5-minute guide. I think that takes consideration of what's going on at the moment. So that's, it's hard to make absolutely hard and fast rules that won't be broken.
Yeah, and actually, that's why in our best practices, we have an exception rule. So that these are standards, even when they're regulations, they're gonna be in the sense of a standard. So that the chair can make modifications on the roll, but certainly to eliminate redundancy and matters that aren't part of the HDC purview. I guess I speak in too declarative a sense when I write these things out, because I've had other people comment that it's not enough time, and I've suggested read through the rest of them, because as opposed to appending each one with subject to exception by the chair.
Approximately 5 minutes.
Well, I wanted to comment on something, and before I get to Connie, the idea that we can have some, it seemed to me like there's this thought that we can have some discussion at the table, and then we don't have other discussion at the table. And as I was saying to Carrie the other day, when you're changing a culture, much as like when you're working with staff who don't know a certain procedure, you can't say just do some of it, because it doesn't get it's not well adapted into their routine that way. So, the idea is that we don't use words like approximately or
You can't.
reasonably, or we stick to a rule, and if there's an exception, the chair says, I'm making an exception, because then it's clear to everyone involved, including other applicants, what's happening and why. There's not a sense that, well, they don't follow their own rules. There's not a sense of favoritism. It's just the way I would suggest we do it. I agree.
It goes with the subjectivity of what we do.
Yeah, but
We're not black and white.
it just needs to
Not
be
a
stated by the
parts
chair,
that
though.
we just checked off
Yeah.
of the
We're
planning.
they're trying to be objective.
Yes, but not like the planning board has their little check boxes of
Right.
that things. We don't, every house has its own unique issues, so.
Because we're talking about art, and
Architecture.
art is subjective, so,
And also people's lives. Connie,
yes, true.
did you want to add anything at this time?
No, I don't think I have anything else to add what's already been said. The only thing I have to say is what's sometimes difficult for me, and we've already talked about it, is the back and forth that sometimes gets a little bit contentious. And then sometimes we lose, or I lose focus on what the real issues are, but I know we've discussed that. So that's really the only thing with, that I would have to say.
Okay, thanks, Connie. I want to second that and support it hugely. It creates, when there's a contentious, you boost coherence. And
I
it's,
have a solution.
and it's one of the reasons why I try to get involved in that aspect.
What do you
call it, taser?
Okay,
I was gonna say a squirt gun.
judicious use only. Okay, so I think this will be the last one. Mine has to do with, basically, let me see from my own notes here. I want to read this for you. Okay, so we're talking about tools, and one of the tools is staff involvement, and one of the tools of staff involvement is approvals or bringing things to the level of near approval. I think and I may be wrong, but I think that we'll have a hard time letting go of that. I think it needs to be an incremental step. I'm referring to the portion that relates to the enabling legislation. My feeling on this is that, well, it's not my feeling, it's my thought. It's not based on emotion, it's based on rational process, is that the HDC would instead review actions required to, under the current act, establish procedures, rules, and if necessary, regulations to allow for routine applications outside the old historic districts, such as fences, door color changes, window replacements, and other non-substantive items to be approved by staff following a consent procedure. I think that this should be extended. I know this may not be welcome, but I think this should be extended to like kinds. And I'm not hard and fast on that, but the reason I say that is not that actually that the HDC retains control, but that the HDC retains responsibility. I think it's incumbent upon the commissioners, no matter how, there's a level of simplicity, obviously, we don't need to review. But again, it's hard to substantiate that in advance sometimes because every case is different. A casement window on a house outside the old historic district, no big deal. It's on the side of the house or the front of the house in the kitchen. But we get one that's somewhere like on a lot in Tom Nevers that's as big as a house. The idea is that the staff would be empowered to advance these types of things as a matter of routine.
Oh, without coming to us?
No, on to consent.
Oh, yeah.
And perhaps like kind, if there's anything that's potentially contentious. Only, and the reason it gets advanced to the HDC on consent or the like kinds if they're potentially contentious. Is that the HDC takes responsibility for it. We all have the opportunity to review these in advance online. If we vote for it, shame on us. If we're not coming prepared to meetings, that's what I want.
Well, what if we had
Okay,
a
can I-
consent checklist, like fences in town can be natural?
You're the one who always tells me that it's so subjective. We can't
Well,
have. a
like,
checklist.
I'm thinking of like a shed. If the shed is located behind the house, in the backyard.
We have all that.
That's
We're
consent.
like moving in a different direction. What Stephen was talking about wasn't consent items. It was like kind replacement.
Right,
Like, so we just had a builder that I know called me up, not my project, and he said, how many weeks do I have to wait to have my like kind roof walk approved? And I looked and he was like, weeks out. And I said, well, what are you doing? What are you doing? And he said, I'm just replacing the roof walk. Everything is exactly the same. And I said, I'm pretty sure that you can do that like a like kind replacement through staff. And he went down and there's a like kind thing that I was unaware of, he was unaware of, and he filled it out. And it's like, as long as he documents the hell out of the roof walk and they're satisfied that he's documented the hell out of the roof walk, it's good to go. Now, my question for you, Stephen, I understand what your goal is in doing this is like, how many like kind replacements are you guys reviewing and approving like on a weekly basis?
Well, that's what I wanted to ask Kelly too, is I don't.
I could give you a full report because we document every single one of them. I can go get the book. from
Well,
us.
no, just curious. If it's like
It
200,
average, well, no, it can average about, can do it by monthly. And Billy's been doing a lot of them, thank God for Billy, I keep on saying that, but about between 30 and 40, I would say on average a month.
oh, okay. So
So-
if it's a manageable number, I certainly am in agreement with you, but if it's like, if there were 200 of them and we're
No.
theoretically supposed to review all those when it's, straightforward.
But
so
my question
anyway.
on that, are you talking about having a different review process for them? Or are we talking
No.
about that we're just putting them on the agenda for your knowledge?
Yeah, they're just on the agenda for knowledge. And then the other thing I wanted to add, just the tail end of that is, if like kind, if it was gonna be onerous for some reason upon staff or the commission, the idea would be that, well, then we need to come up with a tool, a regulation, or a standard whereby we are legitimately authorizing legally the like kind practices is in place. So that is not left off the table in this particular iteration, because there's, chance that we're not exactly perfect on that. So I wanted to bring that up, but I do think that the other aspect of this is there are a lot of applications, maybe not a lot, but there are some applications that staff should be able to, with proper training, both with respect to preservation, which you have as your educational background, and or the commission's understanding the commission's subjectivity through meetings, through experience, as May is developing and has a good handle on. Certain applications, for instance, fences that aren't in the OHD, we have rules, we have guidelines, we have a checklist already. mini split systems.
Yeah.
Windows, like we could come up with some window guidelines. Those types of things, I think we should substantiate to the extent that they are acknowledged, and then you can do them, but then just put them in the consent list.
Yeah. And it would be also a triage for applications as well.
Right, and then the other opportunity there is, at this point, we're sidestepping, weighing into changing the enabling legislation. Because once you open that up, it's like a constitutional convention at town meeting. And we have no idea what will be added to it or changed within it. And I don't think that unless there's something substantial to be changed, that we would do that personally.
Per the National Alliance of Preservation Commissions, they said, whether considering amending the special act should be considered only where necessary structural changes to the law must be put in place to allow, changes. So basically, at the end of the day, both them and MHC have advised, do it under, special circumstances and be careful on it.
Yeah.
That's the worst.
So, thank you for that, Holly. It's very helpful. I think what I'd suggest, unless y'all want to sit around and talk some more, losing my voice, COVID, long COVID. I'm not. COVID. Sorry,
Actually, I just had it, so I can't get it for a little while.
you got 10 months of strong immunity. I've read a recent report. What I would suggest is I'll put together my notes in context and circulate. I'll give them to Holly. She can circulate them to you guys. Holly, if you want to do the same, or maybe we have an offline meeting and distill them once we've got those two documents. And then we'll have these prepared and sent out along with Diane's comments. I'd like to do it if we can, like the Monday
Yeah.
of the week, so you all have at least a couple of days to review them. Does anyone think we should act otherwise?
I like that.
Did we talk about the HDC advisory committees? Do they add value? Did we already cover
That's
that?
what, well, we don't need to talk about it because that's already part of what they would be investigating.
Okay.
Yes, they
We're
do.
gonna document.
Oh, that's-
what that
Yes,
is.
yes, yes.
Yeah, those are questions.
The other one is, I'll just make a comment. I think the review of the conduct of the commission meetings, that whole passage is something that we can really get a firm grasp on ourselves if we just exercise discipline, Robert's Rules of Order. Could meetings be more efficient? Discussion relevant to the agenda items. Staff recommendations provided and considered, so on and so forth. The last thing I want to say in closing is, you guys may not be aware of this, but open meeting law and conflict of interest law, you can, you should, and you're required every 2 years to go online and redo a certificate. If you're not aware of that, I wanted to make you aware of it. Mass.gov, open meeting law online, conflict of interest law online. Get your certificates before the report gets written, because you don't want to be like the guy or gal in the newspaper who the town is saying they're going to repossess their property because they didn't pay their taxes.
And then when you get your certificates, you send them as, she'll keep them on.
What is it?
It's the open meeting law and the conflict of interest law. They're in separate places on
Can
the
somebody
mass.
send us the link?
As could you do that? I think
Oh, that would-
they'll have them at the town clerks or someone who works.
Yes, there
through the town
is.
clerks. Maybe it's Maureen.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure who it is.
I'll send it to everybody.
Yeah, the town used to do it.
Do it and.
Fantastic.
Yeah, the town used to send out a thing, I think semi-annually. And that kind of told.
They used to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was a good reminder because we forget about it. Okay, everyone, thank you so much for your time. I think we're really productive.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
For your time.
Yeah.
And how about a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
The OSC.
The OC, so.
Val, adjourn.
The two-person. Okay, on paper salad. And now I need a motion to turn the HDC. So.
That one.
Okay, so that was from Stephen on the motion. Abby,
Aye.
Val,
Aye.
Eric,
Aye.
Stephen on your motion. Aye. And I'm in favor. All right, guys, thank you. Thanks a lot.